works for brother Alex G Powers, who has a podcast and also a Masonic YouTube channel. And YouTube channel, I believe it's called Historic Light. Awesome channel. Intro, probably one of the best Masonic intros I've seen. I'm very excited to have him on. Very honored to have you on, Worshipful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, brothers. Like you said, my name is Alex Powers. I'm a past master here in Gardner, Kansas, serving currently as the director of Kansas Lodge Research, which kind of took over our Grand Lodge's historical leg about 2 years ago. So I act in the capacity of a Grand Historian for our Grand Lodge. We house the historical archives and library for them digitally now. Within that, I am a Masonic historian. That's kind of been my passion for a number of years. Started Historical Light, as he mentioned, in 2016, and brought on my co-host Robert Marshall about 2 years ago. And yeah, I get bored very easily, so always doing something in the realm of history. So definitely a passion of mine. So thank you guys so much for having me. And are you guys ready to get into the presentation, or is there something to come before it?
Absolutely. No, I guess the question would be, as far as a question and answer, would you like to have this as an open discussion, or would you like to have this as you'll give us a couple of minutes at, towards the end? However you like. We're just fascinated to know about the history and some perspectives. And
for sure, especially on this topic, feel free to speak up and ask questions. This is a topic I'm very passionate about, and I think needs to be practically applied in lodges. So by all means, if something arises, let me know so we can address it before that thought leaves your head. So, and with that, I can also be reached afterwards. If something comes up to you tomorrow, the next day, feel free to reach out to me. Within our Masonic teachings, we come through a lot of symbolism. Some of the more important ones that we're going to address tonight that really touch in on the subject matter: the 24-inch gauge, the hourglass, the scythe, high 12, low 12, the tide, memento mori, even the extent of bodily decay as described at one point, etc., etc. Some of these are more obvious than others, we know. And of course, we see that they all point a very telling aspect at time. See, time is something deeply rooted in our Masonic teachings. It's something that we're often confronted with, and it is something that we cannot get away from. There's actually a piece of passage that we use within the third degree where, if you read it in its full form of scripture, it goes on to say, Hevel, Hevel, all is Hevel. Now, Hevel being something that can't quite be grasped in the manner of water or smoke, or in this case, time. See, time is largely Hevel. And in our particular perception of life, time is real to us at least, but very real indeed nonetheless, and has very real results to deal with. Now, I'd love to jump in on a deep rabbit hole discussion here on the esoteric matters of time. However, we have an unfortunate matter that is pressing, and that is time. Time in the aspect of how it's getting away from us in our historical endeavors with Freemasonry. Now, this talk that we're going to be presenting tonight is titled A Fading Legacy. Whoops, sorry. And it goes through practical applications of preserving our Masonic history. Now, in doing so, we want to get in and fight that battle of time to save history and find those practical applications of how we can go about it strategically. Within that, there's kind of a three-tier process that I like to cover. And that is the facts of preserving, recovering, and then, of course, sharing. Now, seems kind of basic, but a lot of people will go about these processes with not really knowing entirely what it entails or skipping over. So to kind of get into it, the preserve process is to save everything that you have and digitize it as you go. This literally means everything, but the important stuff first, right? If you look in the majority of lodges today, we have really awesome minute books and ledgers and communications that go back years and years and years, depending on the age of your lodge. Some lodges maybe newer, but had a lodge merge with them, and they have very important documents that go back. And we're going to touch on that in a bit, but to me, that is a huge aspect that gets all too often forgotten. You see, when a lodge merges with another lodge, they're known by namesake for some time, but very quickly, just as in life, if you look back to your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and so forth, you may know their name, but very rapidly, within a generation or two, you know nothing about them. And then all of a sudden, they just entirely disappear altogether. And the same thing happens with Masonic history in our lodges. Now, the reason this is so important is because within Masonic research, a lot of people don't really see their lodge as having that almighty importance, right? It's important to me if I belong to that lodge, but is it important in the big picture? Maybe I don't belong to this big, impressive lodge. Well, when you get into research, everything is a puzzle piece. And you never know when that exciting piece belongs to your lodge and it's buried within those mundane minutes that no one else would find value in. There is real value in preserving these matters. But the thing that we're confronted with when we look at time in correlation with this preservation is that, as I often tell people now, I truly believe we are in that last generation of brethren that really have the opportunity to do this. As I went through our lodge records, we just came up on 150 years old. 2 years ago, I brought our history up to date and wrote a book. Within that, going through our minutes and our ledgers, I had ones that were crumbling the second you touched them. I had ones where the binding was just falling apart, pieces of pages entirely missing. And if you think about it, back in the early days, they mixed their own ink. They weren't using ballpoint pens with this bright, brilliant ink. They mixed it themselves. And on a lot of pages, it worked great, and you can still see it. But at the same time, especially here in a rural town in Kansas, back in the 1860s, when that ink ran low and they had a lodge meeting, what did they do? They put a little water in there and shook it up and made it last, which means the writing on those pages was lighter than the rest. And over time, it gets even lighter and lighter to the point that today those pages look blank and our history is literally disappearing from in front of us right before our eyes. So we want to preserve those. Not just the fact of preserving the information inside, which my huge push is digitization, of course, but also to preserve the physical aspect. We want those books to last physically as long as they can as well. And we'll go through some methods of how to do that. The second step we're going to talk about is to recover. This is going to be finding those missing puzzle pieces that lie outside of your minute books, stuff that you don't really know correlates into your lodge history, but it does. For example, in my lodge, when I moved over from my lodge I was raised at to the one here I'm a member of now, it became very quickly obvious to me that they were lacking in their history. Coming up on 150 years old, we had a photo frame on the wall with maybe 25 to 30, and that's probably on the high end, past master photos. And that just stuck out to me very, very rapidly that, wow, we're really missing some history here. And it's in so much more than that as well. It's to recover the history of how your brothers affected the town, of what the town was like around, what the personal life within the lodge was like, right? Who those brothers were and who they were behind just the writing on those papers. There's so many puzzle pieces to that story that can really bring that history alive. And that's the exciting part, is to go out and find that. And that is a recovery aspect. And then the third part we're going to talk about today, gentlemen, is the fact of sharing. Now, for those of you that expressed interest in the history of your lodge or masonry in general, there is a blunt and harsh truth here. And that is that you're not the first one. In my lodge's history, I brought it up to date a couple years ago because it was severely lacking. However, it wasn't always severely lacking. I can find 2 or 3 gentlemen in the past within my lodge that had to put their whole effort in to bring that lodge's history back up to date, right? But because they didn't share it, they didn't put it out there, a lot of their work was mostly lost. And we just know that they did it, but we don't have the fruits of their labors in front of us. So no matter how much you do within these efforts of preserving and recovering, if you don't share it with the next generation of brothers, you're doing the same disservice, and they're going to lose out on it again. So we'll start off with a question here. Do you know who the charter members of your lodge were? This is something to ponder, and if you do know, that's fantastic, but many people do not. And the reason I like to point here to charter members is to get you away from the aspect of past masters. It's kind of a golden age deal. When you think about a lodge's history, it always goes to the past masters. But just as your minute books are such a small sliver of your lodge's history, so are your past masters. For every past master, think how many brothers sat on that sideline and all the history behind them and how they affected your lodge and how they affected the community and so forth. Now, those charter members really give an interesting aspect to your lodge's history, and to look them up, find out who they were and what they were about, really will give you an interesting peer into kind of the personality of that lodge and what they went through in the time, what that lodge makeup was like. You know, we go to a lot of different lodges today, and it's very interesting to sit there and see all the different personalities around you. And that really makes up who that lodge is. You have those brothers that are, you know, very politically motivated. You have those brothers that are very prim and proper, and those that just aren't quite. But all that mixed together gives such a unique personality. And that is one of the extreme joys of historical research, is to see how that's changed in your lodge over the year, but also where it started from in the very beginning with your charter members. So if you don't know who those were specifically, I really, really encourage you, look them up, try to find some pictures of them and see what they were like in life. When you put those into the equation as those puzzle pieces, it really brings together who your lodge was as a person or a personality, a persona, when it first came together. So question, what do you know about your lodge just say 50 years ago, and how do you know it? Largely, everyone's going to point to their minute books. But as we previously discussed here, our minute books quite obviously tell such a small sliver. And there's ups and downs to that, right? They're not supposed to be a novel, but at the same time, they could tell more. When I was going through to write the book on my lodge's history, there was so much that I knew this was a big meeting. For instance, the sale of our building actually happened in between meetings and was just glanced over in the minutes, and was kind of a huge impactful point in our lodge's history, and totally got skimmed over. So we're going to talk about that more in depth here coming up, but to keep that into consideration, that the minutes themselves are not your end all with the lodge history, but also when we get into the aspect here of how to understand that we are tomorrow's history, we need to write those minutes better and take the historical account into context. So we do need to understand that what we do today is very much the history of tomorrow. We need to learn from the trends of the past within the writing of our minutes, write them as a historical record. And it doesn't need to be a novel, but it sure needs to give the details. So for instance, when you read a lot of these minutes, it is very, very dry and mundane, and lodge was opened, discussed this, lodge was closed. And if you get into some of those important meetings with a very important topic, you can get
Oh, do you log up?
Yeah, I think
Yep.
so.
Technical difficulty?
I think so.
All right. We'll give them.
Intermission. What a show.
All right. Okay, you might have logged back on.
Yeah, I'll probably have to
So
reset.
far, so good, right? Pretty interesting.
I mean,
Question.
I've been
Yes, sir.
Fantastic.
He asks a good question. Can we name our charter members?
Excellent question.
I've been harping on you guys for years on that one.
I have one of our Sacramento 40 books, but I haven't been able to read it yet.
It's interesting, like the different brothers who came in, all from. I think we talked about this before a few months ago, as far as guys from the Connecticut Worshipful, or is that where the charter came?
Yeah, because where the charter, that's where our charter came from. That
With guys from Virginia, from I think Kansas too. I want to say.
yeah,
And-
a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, different. I think there's like 14 of them, and they do give a little description of each one. We had like business owners, some. I want to say there was like some city officials in there too.
In ours, yeah, oh yeah, ours. Well, we had James English, John Tutt, and John Glass. They were really big. All three of them are really big in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Sacramento specifically, as well as for Sac40.
Right. It's interesting, kind of what Worshipful Powers was talking about, as far as seeing where lodge characteristics are and how they've changed. So we went from that kind of like startup to over 160 years to there was that time where we had the law enforcement lodge and then the business lodge and all these other. So it's interesting to see how we're all kind of going, or how we've made it now. But then also going back to what Worshipful Powers was talking about, as far as like, just imagine the guys who are like, okay, we got to transfer all our notes to this floppy disk, and from that floppy disk, now we got to transfer it to this thumb drive, and from now we're transferring everything to the cloud. But like, are we really capturing every single thing, just like you're saying? Because right now we do have that the opportunity to store a lot of data, but it's that time that he also talks about. So sorry, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And, and Worshipful Powers, welcome back. We were just, Worshipful and I were just talking about this, and one of my big pushes, I'm the immediate past master and 5-time past master of Sac40, and my big push for my 5 years is always try to review these records, talk about who we were in the past, who these luminaries are that created us, and why it's so important for us to capture those things that we do. So I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm very sorry. I don't know what happened there. Everything just kind of went blank on me. So I apologize.
1,740 miles of internet. I'm sure something happened between there. So
for sure. All right. Well, I don't know where I quite dropped out. So if I'm recapping too much, just let me know. But we were touching here on the fact that we had talked about the minutes and how we need to get better at understanding that what we write today is the history of tomorrow. Within that, we notice that so much when we go into these minutes and these important events that we touch on, that a lot of it is just not covered. And we need to do better at actually giving a little bit of detail there. But also, in my personal opinion, I don't think it would hurt to add a little bit of emotion. Not saying, again, that it needs to be a novel, but at least in a lot of these lodges I've gone through, we see some very important or very, they were heated. Lodge trials, different lodge matters that went on, and you're reading the minutes and kind of like, wow, I really want to know about this. And it literally just says, we opened, we talked about this, we closed. And you're like, wait, what? There was more there. Brethren quit the lodge over this. So maybe to give a little bit of aspect of the feeling in the lodge. And you don't have to go into grave detail, but just some clever words would really add to the historical context for when they're reading this 50 years from now. They'll know, yeah, this didn't go over so well. And there were some strong emotions when it came to this subject matter. Whoops. All right. This is a personal favorite of mine. I like to give my wife crap about this. She joined the Eastern Star for a while, and this is where it became bluntly obvious to me at first. And this is the who signed this. So when you're rushing in a lodge, you've got the Tyler's Register. Now, historically, the Tyler's Register was actually taken care of by the secretary. He would note within the minutes who was there. over time, the secretary's deal kind of got streamlined, and a little bit of that importance or that job duty got handed over to the Tyler himself. And then you had the Tyler's register. Now, legally, Masonic legally, the Tyler's actually responsible to oversee that and make sure that everyone that is attending is signed in and that register is legit. Now, I can tell you in most lodges that doesn't happen, but it needs to, because what we do is for historical importance. People don't always grasp that. It's just, oh, you sign this in case Grant Lodge ever audits us. In the majority of cases, their Grant Lodge doesn't give a crap. They want to make sure that you have your appropriate people there to open in the right form. But largely what we do, especially with these Tyler's registers and stuff, is for historical document. So when my wife signed into Eastern Star one night, she gave a doctor's signature and just whoosh. And I asked her, I'm like, what does that say? Because when I'm going back and trying to write the history book, I'm looking at these signatures and I'm trying to tell, well, who was this and who can I match this up to? And I have no idea if it's just a scribble. So take that into context. And when you're signing in the lodge, make sure it's legible. And that goes with everything we do, not just the Tyler's register. That's the main thing that we touch on. But anything that has to be handwritten, make sure it's legible, because it's not for primarily audits or such, but it is for that historical context. So we have the mission before us of preserving what we have and to find what has been lost. Within there's a couple points that I really urge for lodges to get into within this process. And number one, once you discover that this is something that your lodge is interested in and you want to make sure that the history gets up to date and done correctly, I urge you to put it before your lodge to form a official committee, and not just a official committee for the time, but get it put into your bylaws. This all goes back to the fact that I had two guys in lodge previous to me that really worked their butts off on that history, and all pretty much had been lost by the time I got up to it, and I had to redo everything. So putting it in the bylaws doesn't guarantee it, but it firms it in there and gives it a little bit more of a concrete that it's going to be adhered to and that it is going to be a lasting trend. So it's doing what we can today to set them up for success for tomorrow. So the first part you want to do when you get into practically applying preserving your history is to take an inventory, and I mean everything within your lodge. More notably, you want to make sure that you have all your minute books, your ledgers and everything. Believe it or not, they do come up missing. When our book was written in 1968 for our lodge's history, I rewrote the entire from day one when I did our book, because I found out that a lot of what was covered there was false. And he mentioned in the beginning, Paul Jackson, most worshipful Paul Jackson, I'm sorry, who wrote that, mentioned that the first probably 3 or 4 collections of books were not in our possession. There's no details given there. My assumption is it got put into private possession at some point. Who knows? But by the time I came around, we had them. I don't know where they came from, where they went to, whatever, but we have all the way back to when we were under dispensation, luckily. So we were able to go back and correct a lot of that. But you want to make sure you know exactly where you're at. If you don't have them, if you do have them, make sure you have that notated. And also everything else that's there. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that you have a complete diagram of what's available. And then that goes into the future. If they're trying to recap this, they know what's been there, what's been lost, and what happened to it. You will find some real treasures if you dig around an old lodge, stuff that is probably sitting right before your eyes and you don't even know it's there. For example, our lodge had a horrible roof. We just got it replaced, but we've been plagued by that roof much longer than I thought when I was digging through the minutes. It's been decades that they've been just mending that roof. And so needless to say, over the last few years, I've spent a lot of time crawling into our tiny little attic and, fixing stuff. Within that, I slipped with my foot one day and I hit something and knocked the old horrible attic insulation off, but I noticed something there and I crawled over, and it was the original globes for our pillars. Now, pillars were an awesome story within the minutes. Our lodge had these custom made from a company in California, actually, back in 1911, and had them shipped in, and it was, a lot of expense and a big deal for the lodge, especially for being a, small lodge in Kansas. It was a big deal to have something that nice, custom made and shipped in. Well, we find that those were replaced at a certain point, and I figured they were in the trash, but no, those original globes were still up in the attic, and who'd have known? If I hadn't happened to slip with my foot, they'd still be up there today, covered in insulation, and nobody would ever know. But it's items like that that you want to get your eyes on, and you really got to dig through the lodge to find those. On the same aspect, after finding those globes, we did a little more digging around, and under some other installation, we found the original, well, at least original to this building, which was 1907, but degree tapestries. And they're in horrible shape, but how cool is that to be able to put your hands on an original degree tapestry that you can roll out? Obviously, I said horrible shape, but very, very cool. And it kind of gives you that that personal connection with those brothers that, were rolling those tapestries out back in the day and actually teaching their degrees off of that. It's a surreal level of reality to connect with your history there. So make that inventory and don't miss those hidden treasures. Make sure you dig through. Like I said, it could be on the shelf in front of you. We found some old past master aprons that we're still trying to totally recover the history on, but been in a box on top of a book for 40 years and just nobody knew about it. Another little interesting aspect there, at least in our lodge, we've had a oval picture that hangs on the north wall, and it's a very prominent picture. It's one of those creepy pictures that no matter where you go, the eyes follow you. And when I joined that lodge, I asked everybody, I said, who is that? And I have no idea. That's been here as long as I've been a member. Asked the oldest guy, he's 93 years old, and it goes by Doc. He was a veterinarian. And he's like, yeah, that's been here as long as I've been a member. And he joined back in the early 60s. I'm like, who is this guy? So that really got eaten at me. And it's something that has been literally right in front of everyone's face. And it's an old metal frame, and they actually put the implement in there for the degrees. So every degree, they go grab it off, and it's like that frame plays a very intricate part within our lodge, but nobody knew who it was. Come to find out, it's William McClintock, who was a past master of our lodge for a collective 14 years. So luckily I was able to find a picture of him from another fraternal body, and you just can't avoid the mutton chops. It lined right up. So stuff like that is really, really neat to be able to incorporate into your history and understand those different aspects that come apart. So after you get that inventory made, this is when the digitization starts. It can be fun, but it can be tedious. The nice thing is, just in the last couple of years, technology is booming. I mean, it has been forever, but literally we are in a time of technology where probably by the time you guys get to this, it'll be a whole nother game plan. So when I started out digitizing, kind of the go-to for me was my cell phone. It was the best camera that I could get my hands on, and it did the trick. And it was a lot cheaper than trying to dork around and make some big complex system. So a lot of our early on books, I got digitized through my cell phone. I'd set up kind of a rig system with some lighting, but it was literally my cell phone. Now the tedious part was you had to go through and name each file and yada, yada. Well, just in a couple years, these book scanners have made tremendous, whatever you want to say there, advances within their technology. And now I can do a very thick minute book that covers, 20, 30 years of time in 15 to 20 minutes. And that's probably taking it slow there. So digitizing as you go is extremely important. You want to do those key items first. As I said, going through your lodge's history, you're going to find that some of this stuff is literally crumbling before you. We want to make sure that we capture that data and preserve it for the years to come. So even if it's a book from 20 years ago, if it's the worst case one you have, go for that one first. You want to make sure that the key items in there that you're going to lose that data do get recovered. And then the preservation comes into fact. Now, the way I do this with our books is kind of in the professional sense of things and archival. Acid-free boxes are the most recommended way to go. In my particular lodge, a lot of lodges around here at least, lodges got into buying these big, massive, fireproof file cabinets. and they are dead set on using them. Fine. Acid-free boxes end up taking a lot of room when you do that, and they wanted them in these file cabinets. So I got with some of my buddies who are professional archivists, and we found a pretty clever solution that has worked excellent for us, and that's actually using food saver bags. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the food saver, the plastic bags that air seals it. Those are acid-free. So you can actually put your book in there and air seal it. Now, the very clever thing here is, especially for our lodge, now that we have a roof fixed, it's not a big deal. But before, you can imagine with a very leaky roof, you have levels of humidity and moisture in the air, which can cause all kinds of problems. Well, when they're sealed, air sealed, it protects it from the air, right? It's going to protect it from dust mites, book mites that are actually a huge issue. They will literally eat your books to dust. And also, when they're properly sealed, you can literally run them underwater and you don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, if you ever need to, which you shouldn't with it digitized, you can always pull that up. But if you need to, you can always cut that open and your books are just fine. So we've got into the practice of actually air sealing our books after they've been digitized, put the label in there, of course, so you know what it is, but then they fit right in there. They don't take up any more footprint than they did to start with.
If I may interrupt, as
Of
far
course.
as digitization, are you, like for the old minutes, are you just, snapping a picture and then uploading that with the label on it saying, minutes for whatever? Or how are you guys going about doing that?
So when I started out, yes, that's exactly what I was doing. I was literally snapping a picture with my phone. Now, like I said, just within a couple years, the technology and the price line has just been so much more approachable. They have got some awesome stuff out there. A huge brand that I'm a fan of is Caesar, CZUR. They just came out with a new one. It's the Shine Ultra that I haven't tried yet, but we do have some of those ordered in for the Lodge of Research. But I use the E16 model, and it is fantastic. So now that one, the Shine Ultra, I think comes in at a price tag of about $180, and it's supposed to use the same software. If you guys can do it, this is what I would suggest, is to get one of these setups because it's an all-in-one, and for the price point, it's really fantastic. So like I said, with the cell phone, all you're going to get is an image. With these book scanners, now, this is another thing. There's lots of ways to scan your books. If you go to a historical society, they're going to be more in a general practice of dismantling those books and scanning the pages. Personally, I discourage that. Like I said in the beginning, I like to take two aspects. I like to preserve the data within, but I also like to physically preserve and leave those books in their, original condition and preserve them as long as they're going to last. So, hopefully longer than I'm around, those books will still be there. So I don't want to dismantle them. So I get in the habit of using an overhead book scanner, so they don't come into contact with the book and there's no harm done to the book more than opening it and flipping pages. Is as much as intense as we get into it. But the nice thing about these is they're actually OCR capable. So with the Caesar systems, it's literally you flip the page, click a button, or they even come with the foot pedal now. I like the clicker because it hurts my ankle after a while. But you click, you flip, you click, you flip, and at the end you hit go, and it puts it all into a PDF, and it makes it content searchable,
Nice.
which is a game changer because with granted there, if it's the old handwritten stuff from the early 1800s, it's not going to OCR that. But I've surprisingly had some of that actually pan out where it can read it. But everything that's, typed and all that, dude, it's you just type a key phrase and you got what you need, which is huge. So to kind of jump off on a side there, we're building an archive within the Kansas Grand Lodge right now where we have all of our Grand Lodge data, but we're actually, why I ordered in those systems is we're sending kits around to all the lodges in Kansas with the initiative of getting all of our lodges digitized.
Good for you guys.
For people that have that initiative for Masonic research and say, I want to connect, let's say McClintock, who we talked about a minute ago, to our oldest lodge in Kansas, Wyandotte Lodge number 3. I would have to go to Wyandotte, get an agreeable time that they'll let me in, dig through their books, literally page by page, and and hope for a maybe. Whereas with this, I can say, okay, I want to see this time frame, pull it up on my cell phone, do a keyword search for his name, and boom, I got 4 results, or I got nothing. And that alone can just be a game changer. So if there is the ability to purchase one of these systems, I would do it. Definitely proceed, try to get a more known brand. This Caesar brand has really, really impressed me. With that being said, we tried another cheaper one off Amazon 2 years ago. Their number one thing was they were pricing on their OCR, and it did not work. I went and tried and just did circles. I contacted the company, and I just got, a very broken message saying, yeah, it doesn't work so good.
And this is all seems so relevant, especially right now, just because history has a tendency to repeat itself. So if we were to, if I had something to access what our lodge did during, for instance, the Spanish flu, influenza, we're an old too. So like your building is very similar. We have very similar buildings, downtown, old school building, kind of like a fabric, part of the fabric of the community type thing. To see what those boys did back then, to see, kind of compare how we're doing now. It's so interesting, like, did they have to quarantine? How did they run lodge meetings? So I'm certainly on board with the archiving of minutes and lodge stuff. So.
For sure. Yeah, it is totally interesting to be able to go back and correlate those differences of, not just how they approached it, but also the outlook of it in that historical times kind of persona of how they viewed things versus how it's viewed now. It's very, very interesting. And just like I said, it gives you a neat inside look at the personality of those people and kind of what a meeting was like. You could put yourself in there. So within the aspect of talking about the archiving here, after we get these digitized, in the same way that we want to be cautious about how we store our books, right? We want to be cautious how we store that material because, like I said, I've had historians before me and their work is lost, right? So the number one way today is digital, and it's fantastic. There's so many different cloud platforms out there. Personally, I'm a big fan of Google Drive. It's just, what works for me. But there's a lot of people out there still using Dropbox. Amazon's got one now, Microsoft, everyone's got cloud storage. Find out what works for you, but it's a fantastic opportunity to get into, but also, advised to proceed with caution because just as a book can get destroyed, a file can be corrupted. And I think we've all kind of ran into that. So just proceed in the fact of having multiple copies. So when you get these records digitized, make sure you have it on a thumb drive that maybe you keep at lodge and then send one to your grand lodge. But also, keep them in the cloud storage as well. The awesome thing about the cloud storage is, like I said, we're building a huge one for Lodge of Research, but with my lodge, we house it through Google Drive, but it's integrated into our lodge's website. So our guys can log in and actually pull up our old minutes and documents and stuff from the ease of their mobile phone. And you can have multiple guys in there at once browsing a document. So it just kind of brings it to a new era of research, and that we should definitely be taking part in.
Right.
So other places to explore. Go back to your lodge for one, because I guarantee you missed something. Everyone thinks, I got to a point of, all right, everything's done. Like I said, you're going to be in the attic and kick something and find something that just totally brings out a whole new aspect. But there are other places to explore that can really get into the recovery aspect there. Number one, check with your Grand Lodge. If you haven't, most Grand Lodges have files on each of their lodges where different historical aspects have been turned in over the years, such as Grand Lodge member cards, lodge cards, different artifacts and stuff that might have been turned in. And also there's a lot of external sources out there, such as digital archives through historical societies and so forth. So there's lots of opportunity to really dive in. So some of those other external ones we've talked about will be in the aspect of ancestry.com, newspapers.com. Everything is digital these days. And as we are getting into this, there's a lot of other larger historical societies that have already, and you would be surprised how much content they have in there is relevant towards your research. Historical societies now have digital archives you can get into, and there are a ton of them. You need to look at your city to see if they have one, your county to see if they have one, your state, and so forth. And there can be multiple. The other awesome thing about those is it updates all the time. So once you go through, I don't care what this is, ancestry, newspapers, historical societies, whatever, get into a fact of checking every 6 months or so and see if anything new comes up, because there's always stuff out there. The fact that I put ancestry and newspapers on there is digging into not just the meeting history, but the personality history, learning who those guys were, your charter members, your early members, not just your past masters, but find out who the brethren in your lodge were that were sitting on the sidelines. You're going to find guys that were influential in your community. You're going to find guys like we had one guy in our lodge that had a patent for one of the original fire alarm devices out there. Stuff like that, it's not going to be in your minute books, but it really brings a broader history of who your lodge was.
Yeah, absolutely.
A huge aspect here that often gets missed, interview your brothers, especially those past masters, those elder brothers. You would be really, really surprised the stuff that comes out in those conversations, and you might have to have a few of them. But I'll tell you right now, not even doing historical research, some of the best conversations I've ever had has been visiting another lodge and sitting afterwards and just chatting with one of the old guys about nothing but seeing where that conversation goes. And you will get into some real gem conversations, learn why he joined Masonry in the first place, learn, what it was like when he was studying his degrees, who were kind of those influential people that mentored him along, what that feeling of the lodge was. You get some really awesome stories. Like I was saying earlier, we had this guy at our lodge named Doc. He's 93 years old. And, when he came in the 60s, some of these guys were in their old age that were, from way before I've been researching. And going through these, you get these names, you get a little bit of personality. But when you have a conversation with someone like Doc that remembers the first time he came to lodge, and he's describing these conversations about these people and like putting it into voices, he brings that history to life. And those are those conversations that you can't buy, right? You need to go out and find those and have those, and you'll be thankful you did. So record today's history better. This is always the one that's a little awkward when I do this presentation in lodge, because it gets aimed towards the secretary, and he's always arms up. But look, when we're recording our history, we need to do a better job than we did before. We get in our rushes, right? And you just write down, okay, especially if you're filling in, you don't know what you're doing. We opened, everyone was here. We talked about this, we closed. Do a better job, right? Make sure that we go into detail and that the things are covered that need to be, that it's appropriately correct, and just that it's historically accurate, and it's gonna lend to the research of tomorrow. But beyond that, as you're collecting the history, we need to do better there. There's a reason we're collecting this history, because like we said, it's fallen out of bounds, but we don't need to store our history the same way that we find it. Our history today is these minute books that are mundane and boring for the most part. In today's world, we have so much more potential that was never there before. Potential that we carry around in our hand every day that can easily do audio and video recordings. We can utilize aspects such as social media, websites, and so forth to really preserve and get that history out there, and stuff that you don't take as history, just, events from your lodge. Properly recording those gives that whole different aspect. So when they look back 50 years ago, it's not, well, they held a meeting. They can see, wow, yeah, Sacramento 40 was doing some awesome Zoom and virtual education and all this stuff. And they were doing some stuff. To be able to preserve that by putting it out there, you may not take it as history, but it is if you do it the right way, because it is trackable. When you don't talk about anything you do, and 50 years from now, you never told anyone about the Zoom call. It was private. You never wrote it down everywhere. You never had a Facebook event. It's just going to look like, you were a lodge that didn't do anything when it may have been a leaps and bounds lodge. So to properly record that stuff with today's means, do better than they were able to do in the past, because it's easy for us to do.
Right. And just kind of going back to us alluding to it being the secretary's role, it's the archiving of a lodge is really up to everybody in that lodge. And so like we were going in every second Saturday to go in there and and quite honestly, we just got through maybe one of our safes, and there's an entire building of history there that we haven't even scratched the surface of. And myself and the worshipful, our past master, our lodge is went through a change as far as from the old guard to kind of how, and I don't want to say new guard, but it's interesting how we go back to like, no, that's not how we used to do it. Let's do it how original brothers intended Masonry to be.
Indeed.
So, and going through our records, like we were both scratching our heads. It's like, how do we wrap our mind around this? How do we put this out there? How do we archive it? And so it's just that time that so that's why it's a cumulative type of task. And so digressing from that really quickly, let me ask you, Worshipful, are you guys getting together in lodges, or what's your jurisdiction allow you guys to do as far as with this COVID thing there?
So yeah, here locally, we are open back up now. We just had our second meeting back. Our Grand Master put it to the fact of, obey your local ordinances and take precautions. So we're urging the wearing of masks. We can only open on EA degree right now, and no degree work. Here in Kansas, the EA degree is, minimal contact. There's only one position there that exchanges a grip, and he's urged to wear gloves. So we keep it very, very minimal in that point. But still, we got a lot of guys that just aren't comfortable with that, and, letting them know, hey, that's okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're still, I don't want to say locked down, but we can only meet through phone or Zoom just to kind of conduct lodge business as far as finances, but we can't meet more than 2 people right now. And so like,
for sure,
this itch to get back into the lodge, because what really binds us are those degrees, are those rituals that we do. So that's why when our junior warden, Brother Paul Abiyaskara, kind of approached you, and he's like, hey, Worshipful, we got, he's a historian, this, that. I'm curious to know, like, if you've done research like to what the guys have, for instance, in that Spanish flu that we talked about earlier, just to hear from a different perspective, because this is all new to us, uncharted territory.
For sure.
We're all scratching to do those degrees and to work our craft, and
So especially with the historical context of the Spanish flu, I was really surprised when I looked that up in my local lodge. Not a mention.
Wow.
Not a mention at all. It was just carry on as normal. Now, within that, you've also got to realize that, I live in Kansas. More specifically, the town that I'm in now is Gardner, Kansas, which to this day, I think we have, I don't know, maybe 100,000 people, if that. But we're just south of Kansas City Metro. So like Kansas City is a lot bigger. Gardner's kind of,
you guys are in the burbs.
Yeah, we're really on the edge of the burb. So it's like just past us, it's nothing. But so we're a smaller town, but a rock throw away from us, we've got largeness. But when you go back to 1868, when our lodge opened, this was out there. This was a small town, and it was farmers and just good old tough guys. So they've viewed it a lot differently than I'm sure if you get down into some of the lodges in Kansas City, Missouri, where it's more densely populated and stuff like that.
Right.
You're going to see a different story. Now, Grand Lodge wise, we saw very minimal mention of it. They did notate it, but there was some other stuff going on at the time between conflicts and stuff in the state that kind of took more precedence as far as being reported on. But yeah, not as much media Masonically here as I would have expected notated. And that's one of those things.
Right. Well, I thank you for sharing that history with us. It's always interesting to see what our brothers from different jurisdictions are doing. I guess just me personally, just to kind of get a grasp on like where Masonry is going. I like to, I'm sure like you have, brothers and close friends in every state and jurisdiction. You're kind of keeping to like, hey, what are you guys up to? Like, here's what we're doing. How are you guys coping with this?
Right.
What we do to improve ourselves from this standpoint. So it's all kind of tossed up in the air, and everybody has their own approaches and ways to do things. So yeah.
100%. So kind of diving back in here, another aspect, because I know I've kind of looked, I actually ordered it, but I haven't got it yet. Your lodge has a history book that was written. I'm really excited to get that and read through some of that. But talking about those history books, that's a great aspect. But in today's world, we have another means in which we can do that, right? And that's video. And not to say those books are not important, they are, but we're seeing more and more lodges get into the fact of doing short documentaries. Friend of mine through Masonic research, I came up and met a guy named Mitch Denning out of Tennessee. He did a lodge documentary. He's actually a film student, but as we know, film is accessible to almost anyone these days. And no one's saying this has to be a blockbuster hit, but you can really do some great stuff and get the word out there by doing it. He did a documentary on his lodge, which was Portland Lodge 326. He did this with a mix of his cell phone, a portable audio device, and a drone, and it looked fantastic. But to go in and have, as you see in the screen here, some interviews with those past masters, like we talked about, having those conversations with your brothers, that's just stuff you can't get back. It's moments that are easily lost, that we definitely should take advantage of putting into a video form, whether it's documentary or just for your own benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're starting to work on those type of projects as well. We have some really talented brothers who do have a little bit of that background in the industry as far as like filming and setting things up like that, social media network. So it's interesting to see how we're archiving things now, especially in this current time. And, that's why we asked, it'd be an honor to have you send us a quick, that clip so that we can keep that in our archive. Yeah. That's, you're going to be locked into the Sacramento 40 for time immemorial. So it's awesome. And so like, we're trying to think outside the box and
hey, I'll tell you this right now, you guys are doing fantastic, because think of it this way. How many lodges out there aren't doing anything? Right.
And it's sad because, we can't physically meet, especially here in California.
Right.
But especially with the lodge like ours who are young, with the zeal for Masonry and the appreciation for brotherhood, to really kind of be so engaged with each other on a daily basis that it's like, let's put this stuff on film. Let's create that so our future generations can see what we did during these times, and get away from the handwriting. Although the handwriting from 50 years, 60 years ago was impeccable. I think it was beautiful just reading those books. I'm like, where did penmanship go over time? But
well, some of it, most of it. But I'll tell you for sure, going through those, there were secretaries that I loved because I could read every word and it was so crystal clear. But there was also secretaries I hated that, lasted for 5 years. And I'm like really questioning what the hell even went on in these 5 years, because I can't read a word of it. So, but again, some of that's farmers that, don't work on that impeccable penmanship. But yeah, for sure. And that kind of wraps up the presentation. So, feel free to jump in with any questions here, but the fact of being able to do stuff like this today, it really goes to show that bond between your brothers. And, that's the sad part that I see. We have a lot of lodges here in Kansas. We got shut down for 3 months, with our Grand Lodge turned off meetings, and no one's even allowed in the building. So it wasn't just official meetings. It was, no, I don't want anyone there from the Grand Masters. So that's it. No Eastern Star. Nobody's at the building. So we went 3 months without talking to anybody. And we came back and they reached out to the district deputy and say, hey guys, we want to get our official visits done as quickly as possible. 80% of my lodges in my district I reached out to, and they said, well, we're actually dark this time of year, so we're not going to meet for another few months. Okay. So they just, it really goes to show the route that some lodges are taking. And, if you only meet to keep up those minimal standards, then really the connection between your brothers just isn't there. And it's not really the lodge that you think it is. So by
Absolutely.
doing stuff like this, you guys are really showing that you guys care and what type of lodge you are, showing that connection and that you're going to keep it going. That's fantastic. I applaud you for that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for it. And it's been a pleasure watching you, you know, your YouTube footprint and seeing, you know, how you're carrying masonry onto a different level as far as like talking about these things in a public forum, so we could all kind of get together, because YouTube is the thing to go to, and that's where a lot of us kind of get our masonry from if we're not meeting together. And having a lodge that's this close as far as Sacramento 40, who talk about this stuff, like we text about you, we're like, hey, did you guys watch that historical light one, you know, from 2, did you watch it? I think you did one with an Oddfellows one recently.
Yeah.
Those are cool topics to talk about, and us understanding the bonds of the fraternity, and really knowing that it's not just a square and compass ring, like you'll buy one on Amazon, but it's the everything that's encompassed in that, from our obligation to our morals, our attributes, and to like really staying together and knowing that the way to make good men better is to surround yourself with like-minded men.
Yeah.
What happens that Masons are those guys who you want to be like. And so it's, you know.
Yeah. And here's the thing about that, right? Like what got me into history in the first place is that bond. Because there's just something, I mean, as much as we can put it into words, there's so much about it that we just can't quite grasp and can't put into words. There's just something there. There's something there that keeps us coming back, and something there that bonds us to our brothers. And, you know, with the starting a historical light, some people don't get it. They don't read the explanation, but our logo consists of a skull with a keyhole, kind of in the third eye aspect with some light beaming out. And it's got a little key down to the side. And the aspect behind that was pushing the importance of looking to our past, right? Because when we look to our history, we see that Freemasonry was a lot deeper practiced than it is today, right? And we can cut through a lot of the mundane that we deal with today and learn a lot from our brothers before. And that light coming out is that light that was harnessed from before that we can still access with the right tools, right? And that's what really drew me into our history, is that bond that it's all about at the end of the day. And to see how that translated from the brothers early on and find that message that correlates through, it's extremely important.
Absolutely. And it's all in the ritual, and in between the candidate's coach and the candidate, or the more seasoned Master Mason to the younger Master Mason. It's all that word of mouth, that mouth to ear type of the allegorical references that we use in our ritual to become that better man. And so, like, when you understand masonry, or you see masonry and you're like, wow, like this is way more than I thought it was. It's really, you're really breaking off the rough and first parts of your own stone to create yourself in something way higher, you know, to as in a, and I don't know if you could say, as a, I see you divine reference, a divine kind of being, and understanding that we're so much more, and through masonry we can really kind of set ourselves up to be that better person of the divine. Those are conversations that we could have at a regular stated meeting. So the Zoom thing now, and being able to archive this is really, in my opinion, going to do a lot for the fraternity, for those guys who are like-minded. So,
for sure.
not to keep going, sorry, we're worshipful. So I also see that as I log out of, or open this up, we have a Grand Lodge officer online here tonight, Worshipful Ricky Lawler. It's so nice to have you on tonight, Worshipful.
Thanks, guys. I was just listening, hanging out. I enjoy just listening to you guys, and you're talking the music to my heart as far as the ritual. So I can't agree more, and I'm proud of you guys for. That's kind of like where we're going with the ritual committee. So I really appreciate you guys spreading the word. But thank you. This is a great evening.
Very worshipful. It's good to see you. I miss seeing you at division stuff. I never get to go anywhere.
Hey, I miss you guys. We ritual committee usually has you guys are talking about communication, and I am a big fan of everything you guys are talking about is exactly what I want to espouse. Is there's nothing more important than being able to do a degree, but there's nothing more important than being able to sit with your brethren in person, because there's something there. There's something that can't be attained through the wire that we're missing right now. And I'm with you guys. I'm missing this right now. I want to be with you. I want to sit and lodge with you. It's almost a part of my being able to go and refresh myself and sit in the sanctuary of a lodge room outside of the inside of a lodge room and get away from the toil of the world. You know, it's a sanctuary, and I miss that. So yeah, I'm with you guys. We had Zoom with the ritual committee last night, and we finally got to see each other for the first time in 6 months, and it was interesting.
Fantastic. Well, I got one thing that I do want to push before, you know, stuff gets wrapped up here. And that's the fact that, you know, I come on here and I talk about history. I'm a historian. It's something I truly love. Right. But I don't want to give the aspect that Freemasonry is history. Right. We get so much that is pushed today that's all we want to talk about is history. And granted, this comes from a historian here. I love it. Freemasonry has history. Freemasonry is not history. There's two different things. If Masonry started today, it would have no history, but there's still this very, very special thing within Freemasonry of what it is. The importance of preserving that history and talking about it is the fact so we don't lose that identity. You know, as we go on throughout the future and we're hurting for membership and stuff like that, and we're bringing people in that maybe we shouldn't be, that identity of Freemasonry can kind of hit some snags here. And that's where I really think the importance of recovering and preserving and talking about that history so that we remember who we are, where we came from, and keep that at that core. And that, you know, that correlates totally into exactly what we're talking about here, that deeper meaning, that bond and all, you know, that's really what it ties into. You know, brothers, it means a lot that you asked me to come on tonight. It's been a pleasure. One of these days, I'm definitely going to get out there and hopefully be able to sit in and have some in-person Masonic time with you guys. So it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Worshipful, if you're ever in California, if your travels ever lead you to Sacramento, please know that your Michael personally is always open to you, and
Thank you, brother.
the doors of Sacramento 40 and the Sacramento Masonic Temple are always open to you. So
I do
thank
have
you.
a question before we
What's that?
leave.
Yeah, of course.
If I might. You were talking about scanning books and minutes and, you know, documents. And you mentioned a system, and I didn't quite catch the name of that. And if there was like a model that you're using that we could use, that you recommend, being that you're already doing this.
Yeah, for sure. So the company that I'm really just ecstatic with right now is called Caesar. It's CZUR. I love them for multiple reasons. Like I said, we bought another device a couple years ago for $200 off Amazon, and it scanned, but it didn't do very good. It came out 1080, but it's you know, it's grainy. The OCR doesn't work, whatever. Got into Caesar, it works very well. I mean, I can burn through a book in 15 to 20 minutes, and the OCR is impeccable. So Caesar, their software, it's kind of an all-in-one package. I've been extremely pleased with. Like I said, their newest model out is the Shine Ultra. It came out as a crowdfunding. It's going to hit the open market here very soon. I haven't tried those exact models yet, but I've been told it uses the same software, which I can vouch for is phenomenal. The one I use, let me just tell you here, is the ET16. It, you know, a 16-inch bed. It's fantastic. I'm totally in love with it. It is a little bit more. I think I paid like $400 for it, but it was worth every penny. The Shine Ultras are the more compact model. I think the one issue you'll have different between like the Pro model I have and the Shine Ultra is going to be the lighting. So the Shine Ultra is a one-arm deal. It kind of swings up. It's overhead, but it's got an LED built into it. Classically on those models, the LEDs are not that strong. So it just depends, you know, if you have good daytime lighting or whatever, you'll be just fine, but you may need to have some external lighting. Other than that, just knowing the company and their quality, I think the camera on it's going to be fantastic. I know the software is fantastic. So it's definitely a safe place to start.
Great advice. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure.
Brother, I had one question that I always love to ask Masonic historians. You know, a lot of guys get really deep into like Born in Blood or the Night Lomas series and conjure up these Hollywood level depictions of our fraternity's history way back when. Are there any good volumes or sources that you think are a little bit more rooted in some sort of I don't know, maybe a more realistic term of some of the real early origins of the fraternity?
Definitely. Dang it. So good friend of mine, I'm seeing here, I've got Kellerman, which is past Grandmaster from Kansas here, joined in. Good friend of ours, always comes down from Scotland, James Jack. He shared a book with me, and I unfortunately will have to get back with you to the name of, or the title of that book. But it goes into the origins and the craft of Scottish Masonry coming over, and that I have traced back to be extremely factual, extremely hard hitting. You know, I don't get into a lot of these mainstream stuff that we put out today. I am a source material guy, and that is where I like to stick. I find these, and I have a hard time finishing a lot because I'm right to the source. Okay, here we go. Let's go find the actual meeting minutes for this and line it up. But this one, man, I'm totally struggling. I don't know if he shared it with you, Kellerman, at all, but I can send you guys a picture of it tomorrow. I've got it on my desk at work because he was planning on coming down to the Grand Lodge this year and having a discussion about it. But, you know, our Grand Lodge got booted to the side due to COVID. So I'll get you the title of that book. That has been the most impactful one for me that I've found to be dead on, as far as I can tell, accurate and hard hitting. But yeah, Born in Blood, I personally, I wasn't a huge fan of. I found a lot of inconsistencies in there. A lot of this stuff, especially, you know, new material that we just got to really watch out for is people are reading volumes and then writing about it, and they kick out the aspect of really going to source material. So you're getting to kind of a generation of writing that is a lot of he say, she say. So within that, I just, you know, I urge you to verify what you read, because there is a lot in there that's personal opinion and kind of glorified in one way or another. So definitely always go back and check it to the source material.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. And would, yeah, love to have that title. That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'll get it for you tomorrow for sure.
So, Worshipful Kellerman, I don't think we had the honor to meet you, and please tell us about yourself.
That could be a good thing. Sorry for joining late. Greetings, brothers. Very worshipful. Thanks for inviting me in, Alex. Sac40 is the ideal lodge to put down this archival program. I know you've already got your own stuff going on, but you guys have the perfect demographic makeup to make this thing just go wild across California. And I can't believe Alex just missed an opportunity to promote his own book if he hadn't already done that, because he went into his own records and then wrote his own book. So I'm surprised he didn't throw out that as a historical book for you there. But Alex has really done great things here in Kansas, but the problem he's having is the Kansas demographic is all in that late 50s, early 60s. So there's a struggle getting our lodges to latch on to keeping any of their own history. We recently had a secretary starting to have dementia who was out getting ready to throw the books on the bonfire, and nobody seemed to really give a darn. And that is just scary as heck in this day and age that history could all be gone. And I don't want to say we're trying to force this down there. Alex had a great presentation lined up back in March to give to the craft at large at our annual communication, but then gone. So now he's gone and made a video for that, and we're looking forward to keep pushing that. periodical that's coming out. We're advertising that in there. And so we're trying everything we can to do this, and we're going to end up having to go out there to these lodges, I'm afraid. Well, not me, Alex. And that's the sad reality, and kind of basically sit there on a Saturday and do this for them just so we can preserve their history and the history of Kansas. And we've got a ton. And in our upcoming periodical, there's a guy who did write an article on the pandemic of 1918. And I was just looking over here while we were doing it, and there were 31 lodges that actually lost their charter for a short period of time because they were doing work against the Grand Master's orders. But overall, during that time period, we issued 700 special dispensations, ended up having a net gain of 3,000 guys. So I'm not sure how that worked out, but that was back in a heyday. But that comes from a dig in the historical records of lodges and, well, more particularly the Grand Lodge, because they documented that. And that's what Alex is talking about here. And the thing is, in fact, you guys invite him. I'm preaching to the choir. But from us folks here in Kansas, we are so glad that you invited Alex to speak to you. Speaking to a very worshipful's comments, our Grand Master just penned an article that talked just about what he said about how as soon as they shut the doors of our lodge, we instantly had that longing to get back. And who'd have thought we'd yearn for the sound of the gavel, that, you know, a firm grip and a knock on the door. Right. But that is just crazy. But again, brothers, from all of us here in Kansas, we love what you're doing. We'd never say we watch what you're doing so we can copy some of that, but I've enjoyed my trips every time I come out to California. I haven't had the pleasure of visiting Sac40 yet, but maybe Alex and I can travel out there. So thank you.
You'll be our close personal guest, worshipful, and we look forward to you guys coming out. And certainly one of the reasons why we're reaching out and using this as almost a silver lining in our craft is to make sure that we're on par with Masonry, just to kind of keep our hand on the pulse of the craft, and make sure that if there's anything we can do to improve, you know, we have references like you guys who are really kind of moving the craft forward and using these times as again an opportunity to really kind of sense who we are. So thank you guys for that, and it's been an honor watching you guys watching your YouTube channel. It's awesome. I dig it.
One other thing before I go, I tell Alex this and other guys all the time. We all get so obsessed sometimes with, and no offense to very worshipful or any other Grand Lodge officer, past, present, or future, we get so obsessed with those gold collars and stuff, but it's the historians that make the difference in our craft. I would challenge you to name the Grand Master of California in 1984 or 94 or 2004. Right. We don't remember them. Maybe when they die or something, their name will come up again. But it's these historians and what they do for the craft that we remember. So this work that Alex is talking about, this is the important stuff. What we're doing at your lodge is the important stuff. And we may not know that now, but the brothers of the future will definitely know your name.
Thank you so much, Worshipful. I hope that our brothers in 50, 100 years from now look back on this and say, like, they went across state lines, across jurisdiction lines to really, this is what the brotherhood really meant. This is what it is. And if you come up with something that kind of is an obstacle, you figure out a way to move past it and learn how to bridge gaps from different levels. So thank you guys for coming on tonight. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, brothers. It's been a pleasure to be here. Can't wait to get out there and see you guys in person, but it's been an honor.
Yeah, definitely. So, do any other brothers have anything else to bring before this Zoom meeting? Got it. Well, thank you everybody so much. And as a tradition of Sac40, as we're on Zoom, we typically raise a glass towards the 9 o'clock hour, but I think with the time distance, we'll cut this one short tonight. But we raise our glass to the brothers. So if you guys have one, we'll take a couple seconds to get something for the brothers who aren't here with us. And with that being said, may the blessings of heaven rest upon us and all regular Masons. May brotherly love prevail, and every moral and social virtue cement us. Amen.
So mote it be.
With that, brethren, thank you again for coming on tonight. Sac40 bros, we will see you guys on text message probably within the next 5 minutes. And yeah, we'll look forward to the next one.